Hey guys, Miss Lambert here. Today we're going to read one of my favorite books. I thought this would be great since I'm reading this during National Literacy Month. And so this book is called Going Someplace Special. It's written by Patricia McKissack and Jerry Pickney. So I hope I pronounced those names correctly. But I want to know, where is someplace special for her? So let's see what happens. Alright guys, I love this book. I love it. Trisha Ann was about to burst with excitement. Crossing her fingers and closing her eyes, she blurted out her question. Mama Frances, may I go to someplace special by myself today? Pretty please. I know where to get off the bus and what streets to take and all. Although it had another name, Trisha Ann always called it someplace special because it was her favorite spot in the world. Please, may I go? Pretty please, with marshmallows on top. I don't know if I'm ready for you to turn you loose in the world, Mama Frances answered, tying the sash of Trisha Ann's dress. Getting off alone is a mighty big step. I'm ready, the girl said, taking a giant leap across the floor. See what a big step I can make? Well, Mama Frances chuckled, all the time studying her granddaughter's face. I trust you'll be particular and remember everything I've told you. I will, Trisha Ann said, real confident-like. Suddenly her smile grew into a full grin. So you're saying I can go? Well, I reckon, but you best hurry off before I change my mind. And pulling her pocketbook on her shoulder, Trisha Ann blew her grandmother a thank you kiss, and then she rushed out the door and down the sidewalk. And no matter what, Mama Frances called after her, hold your head up and act like you belong to somebody. At the corner, a green and white bus came to a jerky stop and hissed. When the doors folded back, Trisha Ann bounded up the steps and dropped in the fare, same as when Mama Frances was with her. The girl squared her shoulders, walked to the back, and took a seat behind the Jim Crow sign that said colored section. Well, Trisha Ann had seen such signs all her life. She recalled the first time she and Mama Frances had taken this bus ride, and her grandmother had told her, those signs can tell us where to sit, but they can't tell us what to think. I'm going to think about someplace special, Trisha Ann said to herself, and turned to look out the window. Stop by stop, the bus began to fill. At the farmer's market, people crowded on carrying bags of fruit and vegetables. Miss Granel, Mama Frances's friend from Sewing Club, climbed on board. As she inched her way toward the back, Trisha Ann noticed that there were no seats left behind the Jim Crow sign. So she stood up and gave Miss Granel hers. Oh, it's not fair, she said, glaring at the empty seats up front. No, but that's the way it is, honey, said Miss Granel. But I don't understand why, she began, but by now the bus had reached Trisha Ann's stop in front of Capitol Square in the heart of downtown. The door swung open and she hurried off. Carry yourself proud, Miss Granel called out the window as the bus pulled away. Holding her hat, Trisha Ann leaned back as far as she could to see Peace Fountain's magnificent water show. It made her dizzy to watch the sprays that shot high up into the air, but she liked the feeling and turned around and round with her arms outstretched. Then, giggling, she staggered on wobbly legs to a nearby bench. Instantly, Trisha Ann leapt to her feet. On the bench was a sign that said for whites only. Her face fell, and she wished for Mama Frances's strong hand to hold. Silly signs, she muttered as she strutted away on sober legs. At the edge of the square, she greeted Jimmy Lee, a street vendor. "What's got your face all clouded up like a stormy day?" he asked, handing Tricia Ann a free pretzel. "Jim Crow makes me so mad," she said. "My grandfather was a stone mason on Peace Fountain. Why can't I sit down and enjoy it?" Well, Jimmy Lee pointed to a sign in Monroe's restaurant window. He said, "My brother cooks all the food they serve, but do you think we can sit at one of their tables and have a BLT and a cup of coffee together?" Then with a chuckle he whispered, "Not that I'd want to eat anything Jesse cooks, and that man can't even now scald water." The light changed and Tricia Ann carefully started across the street. "Don't let those signs steal your happiness," Jimmy Lee called after her. Well, Tricia Ann pulled her shoulders back and fixed her thoughts on being inside that warm and welcoming place where there were no signs. Hurrying up 10th Avenue, she passed the filling station and stopped to buy a pop to wash down Jimmy Lee's pretzel. At the second light, the Southland Hotel rose up in front of her, as spectacular as a palace. Mr. John Willis, the hotel's doorman, saw her. "I believe an angel done slipped away from heaven," he said, smiling. Well, Tricia Ann managed to smile back. Mr. John Willis always said the nicest things. "No, sir, it's just me." "Your mouth is smiling, but your eyes aren't," he said. Just then, a long white car with 2 police officers, escorts, pulled up in front of the hotel. A man with black, shiny hair and shy eyes stepped out, and suddenly people were everywhere screaming and begging for his autograph. Tricia Ann got caught up in the crowd and swept inside. So often she'd wondered what it would feel like to walk on the royal red carpet that covered the double winding staircase, or to stand in the light of the chandelier that looked like a million diamonds strung together. And now she was there, smack in the middle of Southland's Hotel's grand lobby. You see her caught here, just in the middle of everybody. Somebody pointed at her. "What is she doing in here?" It seemed as if the whole world had stopped talking, stopped moving, and was staring at her. The manager pushed his way to the front of the crowd. "What makes you think you can come inside? No colored people allowed!" And he shooed the girl away with his arms. Tricia Ann backed out, shaking her head. "Well, I didn't mean," she said, trying hard not to cry. Hurrying past Mr. John Willis, Tricia Ann ran straight into the Mission Church ruins where Mama Frances often stopped to rest. There, in the protection of the walled garden, the girl let the tears come. "Getting to someplace special isn't worth it," she sobbed. "I'm going home." "Well, my flowers have been watered already," came a voice above her. It was Bloomin' Mary, an elderly woman who took care of the garden with neither permission nor pay. "Bloomin' Mary is a kind and gentle soul," she told Tricia Ann. "You lost child?" the woman asked. Trying to steady her voice, Tricia Ann answered, "No, ma'am. I just wish my grandmother was here to help me get to someplace special." "You can't get there by yourself?" "It's too hard. I need my grandmother." Bloomin' Mary nodded and thought on the matter. Then she said, "I believe your granny is here, just as my granny is here with me even as I speak. Listen close. Tell me what you hear." All Tricia Ann heard was the distant buzz of a bumblebee. What was Bloomin' Mary talking about? But as she listened closely, she began to hear her grandmother's steady voice. "You are somebody, a human being no better, no worse than anybody else in this world. Getting someplace special is not an easy route, but don't study on quitting. Just keep walking straight ahead and you'll make it. Tricia Ann recalled these words from many conversations they'd had in this quiet place. They were so comforting. She didn't feel alone anymore. She wiped her eyes and straightened her hat. "You were right, ma'am," the girl told Bloomin' Mary. "Mama Frances is here, and she wouldn't want me to turn back." "So you aren't lost after all," said Bloomin' Mary, giving Tricia Ann a bright orange zinnia. "No, ma'am, I'm not." And saying goodbye, she headed real determined like on her way. 2 blocks later, Tricia Ann came to the Grand Music Palace where a group had gathered for the matinee performance. As the girl approached, a little boy spoke to her. "Howdy, I'm Hickey and I'm 6 years old today. You coming in?" Before Tricia Ann could answer, an older girl grabbed his hand. "Hush, boy," she said through clenched teeth. "Colored people can't come in the front door. They got to go round back and sit up in the buzzard's roost. Don't you know anything?" His sister whispered harshly. Hickey looked at Tricia Ann with wide, wondering eyes. "Are you going to sit up there?" "In the last 3 rows of the balcony? Why, I wouldn't sit up there even if watermelons bloomed in January. Besides, I'm going to someplace very, very special," she answered, and then Tricia Ann skipped away. "I want to go where she's going," she heard Hickey say as his sister pulled him through the door. At the corner, Tricia Ann saw a building rising above all that surrounded it. Looking proud in the summer sun, it was more than bricks and stone. It was an idea. Mama Frances called it a doorway to freedom. When she looked at it, she didn't feel angry or hurt or embarrassed. "At last," she whispered, "I've made it to someplace special." Excuse me, guys. And before bounding up the steps and through the front door, Tricia Ann stopped to look up at the message chiseled in stone across the front facing. And if you look up here at the top, guys, it says, "Public Library, all are welcome." All are welcome. So this was a spot where she could go. Everybody could go. And I just want to go over the author's note for this. Remember that Patricia McKissack wrote this book. Okay? The author's note, "This is my story. Although the setting has been fictionalized, the events are taken from my own childhood growing up in Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville, like most southern cities in the 1950s, was segregated, and that means it was kept separate. They had African Americans. Jim Crow kept everything separated. There were separate schools, separate churches, separate restaurants, separate places where you could sit and eat and everything. It was horrible. So the doors of hotels, restaurants, churches, and amusement parks were posted with Jim Crow segregation signs that barred African Americans, who also had to endure the further indignities of riding in the back of the buses, attending separate schools, sitting in the last rows of the balcony, and drinking from separate water fountains. But in the late 1950s, Nashville's Public Library Board of Directors quietly voted to integrate all their facilities. The downtown branch was one of the few places where there were no Jim Crow signs, and blacks were treated with some respect. Most African American parents waited until their children were mature enough to cope with segregation before allowing them to venture outside their communities alone. I was almost 12 when my parents trusted me to make the trek to the library by myself. But like Tricia Ann, I have been fortified enough love, respect, and pride to overcome any situation I encountered. Along the way, I had to face all kinds of racial bigotry and discrimination. But for me, the library was always filled with a specialness that made the effort worthwhile. Since I felt welcome there, I checked out books more often And the more I read, the better I understood why my grandmother believed the library was someplace more exciting, more interesting, and more informative than hotels, movies, restaurants, and amusement parks. She, like Andrew Carnegie, whose great wealth helped build the library, knew that reading is the doorway to freedom. Public library, all are welcome. So what I want you guys to kind of take away from this story, one, there were places, and places like Chattanooga were the first ones to allow to desegregate certain buildings. The library was one of the first ones. And I just feel like that till this day that still holds true. The more you read, the better you become at reading, and the more that you read, the more you learn, the more you know. And education, information, that is your ticket out of anywhere. It's your ticket to anywhere. So keep that in mind, guys, as you think about places that are special to you, as you think about books that you have read that are special to you. And until I see you next time, where we will read again. Have a great afternoon, guys.